On September 15, 2008, Lehman Brothers, the fourth largest investment bank in America, files for bankruptcy with over $600 billion in assets vaporized overnight, triggering a global market meltdown that wipes out trillions and leaves millions jobless. No fluffy metaphors here, just cold, hard facts. CEO Dick Fuld walks away with hundreds of millions in bonuses, while the dumb money, those everyday retail suckers with their 401s, Ks and home loans, get absolutely wrecked, watching their life savings turn to dust in the biggest financial rug pull since the Great Depression. Back in the early 2000s, the housing market looked like the ultimate casino jackpot. Banks were handing out mortgages like candy at a kid's party, ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets, whatever. We're talking subprime borrowers with FICO scores in the toilet, getting approved for six-figure homes they couldn't afford on a bet. Wall Street geniuses bundled these trash loans into mortgage-backed securities, sliced them up, and sold them as safe investments with AAA ratings from Moody's and S&P, who were basically on the take, collecting fat fees to stamp approval on this garbage. The numbers were insane. By 2006, subprime lending hit $600 billion annually, up from peanuts a decade earlier. This wasn't organic growth. It was the puppet masters, big banks like Goldman Sachs and Bear Stearns, engineering a massive pump to the moon on housing prices, inflating a bubble where home values doubled in places like Vegas and Miami, all while origination fees and commissions lined their pockets. And then the trap snapped shut. These bonds weren't just bonds, they evolved into Frankenstein monsters called collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs, basically stacking risky subprime slices into new packages and re-rating the crap as gold. The strategy? Hide the rot. Banks knew the underlying loans were dogshit, teaser rates that reset after 2 years, jacking payments up 50% or more, guaranteeing defaults. But who cared? The house offloaded the risk to pension funds, insurance companies, and foreign whales, using synthetic CDOs to bet on bets, creating infinite leverage. It was a classic Ponzi. As long as prices rose, everyone got paid. Opportunity cost? Forgotten. The real economic kicker here was loose Fed policy under Greenspan, keeping interest rates dirt low post 9/11, flooding the system with cheap money that fueled this debt orgy. But a few sharp outsiders smelled the scam. Guys like Michael Burry, a one-eyed ex-neuro doc running Scion Capital, who crunched the data and saw default rates spiking as early as 2005. Right when the noobs were FOMOing into flipping houses and adjustable rate mortgages, thinking they'd retire on equity pools, these contrarians executed the big short. Burry loaded up on credit default swaps, insurance bets against the bonds failing for pennies on the dollar, tying up $1.3 billion in premiums, but positioning for a 100 times payout if the market tanked. Steve Eisman, a cynical hedge fund boss at Front Point, joined the fray after dissecting household debt numbers, showing Americans owing more than they earned for the first time ever. He shorted the banks themselves, betting their balance sheets were bloated with toxic assets. Meanwhile, garage band investors Charlie Ledley and Jamie Mai at Cornwall Capital turned $110,000 into a $30 million play by sniffing out mispriced options on these CDOs. And Greg Lippmann, a slick Deutsche Bank trader, peddled the swaps like a street hustler, convincing skeptics the end was nigh. The execution was brutal precision. They pored over loan tapes, uncovering fraud like borrowers lying about income by 50% or more, and watched as early defaults in 2007, up 30% year over year, signaled the cascade. Wall Street laughed them off as doomsayers, but these guys held diamond hands through margin calls and investor revolts, knowing the math didn't lie. As it turns out, the aftermath was a bloodbath that exposed who was stealing from whom. When the bubble popped in 2008, home prices plunged 30% nationwide. Foreclosures hit 2.8 million that year alone, and the CDO market evaporated, costing banks $700 billion in write-downs. Lehman went belly up. Bear Stearns got fire sold for $2 a share, and AIG needed an $182 billion bailout because their financial products arm had insured trillions in this junk. The whales? They got richer. Barry's fund returned 489% net, turning $100 million into over $500 million. Eisman pocketed $1 billion for his investors. But the chickens, the retail bag holders, got rugged hard, with 8 million jobs lost and $10 trillion in household wealth nuked. Your long-term investment in that dream home. Just babysitting a billionaire's next yacht while you drown in underwater mortgages. Right at this moment of peak euphoria in 2006, when subprime bonds were pumping like shitcoins on a hype train, the puppet masters decided it was time to unleash Northern Dark Divine Skill. Beiming Shen Gong, Xiaoyao sect, lost tradition approximately 150 years ago, sucking liquidity straight from the dumb money's over-leveraged positions, absorbing their FOMO buys to fuel even higher prices before the inevitable dump. It was savage. Banks like Merrill Lynch burned cash on champagne showers for execs while engineering the trap, knowing full well the ratings agencies were in on the con, slapping AAA on tranches that were 80% subprime poison. The system's corruption was laid bare. Regulators asleep at the wheel, incentives rewarding short-term greed over long-term stability. While you're staring at the red charts crying over your foreclosed house, some whale is buying his third Ferrari with your rent money. Thanks for the donation, kid. But here's the reality check deregulation in the 90s, like repealing Glass-Steagall, let commercial banks gamble with deposits, turning the casino into a slaughterhouse where the house always wins. And just when the crash hit full force in 2008, with margin calls zeroing out funds left and right, the smart money countered with Dugu 9 swords. Dugu Jujian, Dugu Q Bai, lost tradition 200 years ago, breaking every fake-out pattern Wall Street threw, slicing through the illusions of safe bonds with pure price action to rake in profits while the noobs got liquidated. The market doesn't care about your feelings, it only cares about your liquidity, and in this rigged game, the forbidden skills ensure the 1% feasts on the carnage. This wasn't just a summary. It's the hard truth. Money isn't created or destroyed. It's just transferred from the guy sleeping under a bridge to the guy sleeping with a supermodel in a penthouse. If you're bag holding today, remember the 2008